The sitting is resumed. When the suspension was taken, we were on order number 21, and with that we shall continue. Honourable Members for St. Michael Northeast.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I regret that as I stand, the Honourable Minister of Finance is not here, because if he were here, I would actually take my seat again and allow him another half hour to be able to answer the questions which we have formally asked him as an opposition on behalf of the people of Barbados. Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me say from the outset that in our view, the view of the opposition, this exercise is an exercise in futility. This Parliament dissolves 3 weeks from today. And this Parliament, Madam Deputy Speaker, is seeking to discuss this country's future at perhaps the most critical juncture in its modern life since independence. The situation in which we find ourselves today exceeds that, is worse than that which the country found itself in 1991. The situation with respect to our debt continues to balloon in spite of the fact that this government has said year after year after year, and I've pulled every possible statement, starting with the one in this term from the August 2013 budget, as to the measures that they will take in order to be able to reduce the debt and to stabilize this country's condition. This country's reserves continue to decline at too fast a rate. And ironically, it is the same speech of the Minister of Finance in 2013 that set as its objective the stemming of the decline in those reserves, which, according to the Governor of the Central Bank 10 days ago, stands at least $1 billion less than it did in May of 2013. This has nothing at all to do with where it is today. And I therefore start, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the purposes of the records of this Honourable Chamber, to repeat those questions which we believe to be critical in order for us to have an understanding as to what is the vital statistics of the patient called Barbados. The member for St. Peter used that language 2 years ago in this very chamber with respect to the patient. One, what is the level of international reserves as we speak in Barbados today? Two, what is the level of the value-added tax and income tax and corporation tax refunds owed to companies and individuals? A figure that will constrain the capacity of those companies and individuals to meet their normal household and corporate obligations, while at the same time will add to the debt and the deficit of the government of Barbados. What is the level of other arrears owed by the government of Barbados to other entities in this country? And the same applies there with respect to the health of those companies and their ability to survive, particularly when many of them are relying now on overdrafts at exorbitant rates in the absence of government paying its bills on time. Four, with respect to the 2018-2019 estimates, you forecast a reduction in subsidies and transfers of $87 million. And how do you propose to face that? Terms and conditions of entities will be the only way, if changed, that those liabilities will not be incurred. What is significant, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that in 2013, we heard the member in his budgetary speech on August 13, 2013, address this. In 2014, December, on the 16th of December 2014, another ministerial statement with respect to statutory corporations and transfers. But I'll come back to that. Number 5, has the Central Bank written to you, the Minister of Finance, pursuant to sections 26 with respect to our foreign reserves and 48 with respect to our monetary stability of the Central Bank Act? And have you, the Minister of Finance, responded or agreed to any course of action proposed by the Central Bank of Barbados? Number 6, having told us in 2013 that cuts to employment were the only way for the country to get out of this recession, and having sent home 3,000 workers announced the dismissal on December 13, 2013, what is the employment level in central government and statutory corporations today? Number 7, with respect to the government paper held by the central bank, how many Barbados dollars has the central bank printed to buy government debt to keep the government afloat? And may I add to that, can you also indicate the level of securities, increases in the securities to be held by commercial banks, leading to the same impact of additional domestic credit creation with an impact on the reserves? And 8, how does the Minister of Finance intend to create the fiscal room necessary to pay for the renewal of crumbling infrastructure that is negatively affecting our country, like the sewage system, the roads, the buses, the garbage, the trucks, to name a few? Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we take no delight in asking these questions. And we ask them, particularly, and I take them one by one, because they're vital. If this country's reserves are declining at a rapid rate, what has the Minister of Finance told us today that is intended to arrest that decline? What will this government do immediately to protect Barbadians from the impact of that rapid decline of reserves in our country? That was the message not of the opposition, it was the message of the Governor of the Central Bank, delivered 2 Wednesdays ago. It was echoed by the International Monetary Fund in its press release. And we are yet to see the Article 4 report because the government has not yet given permission for that report to be published so that the people of Barbados can have a true prognosis of the economy from an independent entity. That report and that assessment by the governor was mirrored thereafter by Moody's less than a week later. And finally, by the Caribbean Development Bank last week, who echoed the same concerns and who went further to indicate that Barbados was likely to perform the worst in this upcoming year of all of the member countries, borrowing member countries of the Caribbean Development Bank. We believe that the minister must remember what he tells this honorable chamber. He admitted to this House that he gets a daily report of the reserves. And even if he was not willing to share with this honorable chamber and the public the level of reserves, he had a duty, in our view, to be able to put a clear stabilization plan in place with respect to the decline of the reserves, because the governor of the central bank has already conceded that the decline since May 2013 is in excess of $1 billion. 2, I spoke to the arrears. And the arrears, Madam Deputy Speaker, continues to hurt from the very, very small in this society, people who still are awaiting their income tax refunds for 2 years and 3 years, to those larger entities who are awaiting VAT refunds. The government has spoken too long about the possibility of a VAT factoring program, but nothing has happened. And as the government speaks, the companies and the households starve. We believe that this government has a duty to be honest and to tell us whether they continue to use the building up of arrears as a form of adversarial financing to a ballooning deficit that they had for the last few years and continue to have. That this deficit appears to be 3.7%, does it not reflect the fact that they still have not brought to book the full account for the University of the West Indies? that they have not brought to book the full account for other entities that are owed. And we continue to exercise ourselves in a political charade without reference to the true costs of the services being delivered by this government with respect to what is before us. We know that the sugar farmers continue to be owed for 2016 and 2017, not to mention 2018. And we know that there are other companies across Barbados, whether it is SBRC or other entities, that are owed significant amounts of money. We know that the National Insurance Scheme, to which the Minister took great pride in telling us that they cleared all the debt today. But you know, I have learned, sir, with this man, with this Minister, you have to listen carefully and you have to check. Because the Minister neglected to tell you that what he cleared was purely central government, and that what was cleared was only to November 2017, and that what is still owed to the National Insurance Scheme is a princely sum in excess of $160 million. The government of Barbados incurs a debt to the National Insurance Scheme for central government of $12 million a month. And on behalf of the statutory corporations, that amount is about $5 million. The government is yet to clear the $130 million as of November owed for the statutory corporations. And when you add, therefore, the $12 million a month for central government for December and January, $5 million more a month for December and January, you are talking about another $34 million plus the $130 million for the statutory corporations. In excess of $160 million, 164 to be precise, that is still owed. But what is worse, when you ask the National Insurance Scheme to take $183 million in government paper, you are compounding a situation that exists for them because they need cash flow. And when you ask them to take the government paper while at the same time calling them to meetings to discuss reprofiling of their interests, you are taking in one hand and you're giving back in one hand and taking it back in another hand. The National Insurance Scheme has to have some cash flow because its expenditure cannot be met by the contributions given the government's inability to be current with its contributions. And it therefore has to draw down its investment income in order to meet the obligations to those whom it must pay every month. And as if that were not bad enough, it now means that instead, a National Insurance Scheme, which was holding $1.4 billion in government paper in 2007, is now holding in excess of $3.7 billion as a result of this latest action to force them to take government paper. And that has nothing to do with the almost $200 million now outstanding still for statutory boards and statutory corporations. Does this government understand that the NIS is not a department of central government? And that the members of the board of the NIS have a separate fiduciary duty? But let me go further. The reason why I asked the Minister of Finance about the letters from the central bank, and he knows that he received a letter in September from the governor. Let him confirm whether he also received one in December and one in January. How many times must the central bank write the Minister of Finance? And how long will the Minister of Finance continue and the Prime Minister to bury their heads in sand, knowing that this country stands on the brink while this government continues to play around, waiting purely to protect their own narrow political interests, with a parliament that is dissolving, bringing a plan that requires parliamentary action for 90% of the actions in here. But no parliament will exist in 3 weeks' time. But we spend 2.5 hours today discussing a plan that really should not be called the Barbados Sustainable Recovery Plan, but should be retitled Beyond the Mandate. Because there is nothing in here that they can do properly. Hardly anything without a mandate from the people of Barbados after the next election. And that is a fact. But we are left to stand in here for 5 hours listening to a minister talk and talk and talk and talk, and the patient is bleeding out. A doctoral dissertation when what is required is to stop the patient from bleeding. And this opposition will not participate in this charade, in this estimates, and we will speak only to the vital issues that affect this country's stability and health. Section 26 of the Central Bank Act makes it very clear, and I quote, Section 26, subsection 3, if the reserve of external assets has declined, or in the judgment of the board appears to be in danger of declining, but the governor of the central bank already told you that it has declined. So as to jeopardize the adequacy of such reserve, the bank shall submit to the minister a report on the reserve position, not may. In law, shall is mandatory. And the causes which have led or may lead to such a decline, together with its recommendations concerning the measures it considers necessary to forestall or otherwise remedy the situation. Madam Deputy Speaker, so serious is that obligation that it goes on in the next subclause to make it clear that the bank has a duty to continue to make further reports and recommendations at intervals not exceeding 6 months until such time as in the judgment of the board the situation is rectified. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know, and the Minister knows, that as of Friday evening the situation hadn't improved. In fact, it had significantly declined. And therefore what we expect today is not the lot of long talk that came in here, but an entreaty, an appeal to the country that these are the actions which this government is taking to stop the bleeding. And this is the basis upon which we ask all Barbadians to stand together to make sure that we protect this country's reserves, and then we go on to discuss anything else that may divide or unite us. That is what I expected from the Minister of Finance today. And the sad thing is that this government will continue to perpetuate the folly, but you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, you can run, but you can't hide. And this country will not be forgiven of a minister or a government or a prime minister that is now playing fast and loose with the future of Barbadian households, Barbadian individuals, and Barbadian companies. And I say to you that the time has long passed for urgent intervention. If the member for St. Philip West and the member for St. Peter last year told you, as we did, that the intervention was urgent last year, and if all of the indices have gotten worse, what, pray tell, is the urgency today? And how do we contemplate letting time run out? But you see, when they thought they could let time run to the end, they thought that the reserves would hold out. But time is always, always longer than time. And what is the reality of this condition? Madam Deputy Speaker, I have made a list of the crisis situations in which this country finds itself. That whosoever shall constitute the next government does not even have the luxury to look left or right, but has immediately to deal with from day one. I have spoken sufficiently about the issue of the foreign exchange position and the decline in the reserves. And I've said that this glorified to-do list, which nobody can disagree. But this plan cannot stabilize Barbados' reserves next week or next month. Who are we fooling? Then there's the issue of the debt. And this government continues to skirt around it, if only, I assume, to placate the member for St. Philip West, because for 4 years he has told them they have a debt problem, and for 4 years they have ignored him in the cabinet. His letters have already been made a document of this House. That is true too. But what is the matter that lies before us today? That the other things that are in crisis have to be considered as part of a public sector investment program if there is no appropriate private sector mechanism to deliver it, but we continue to ignore the reality that the government's public sector investment program has now to be properly structured and appropriately prioritized. The notion that the member for Christchurch East can be building a 5-story monstrosity at Vaucluse in St. Thomas, standing up on its own out of the air, not low at all, and not enough trucks to collect garbage in Barbados. So the management of the Sanitation Service Authority will go to work in splendid air-conditioned facilities, well appointed, perfectly furnished. I love that. But guess what? The people of Barbados want their garbage collected. The Water Authority building, built, splendid accommodation. But the people in the north, if they can't get water, they get in brown water. And the member for St. Lucie can bear back, pull a glass of water and say, look, 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 I could drink it. But then again, this is the same member who has told us about chikungunya. The bottom line, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that we have a misplaced public sector investment program in a situation where our debt is the 3rd highest debt to GDP ratio in the world, after Japan and after Greece. And Japan can print and hold their own reserves in US dollars, and Greece has the European Union to back it up. Barbados continues to have a higher debt to GDP ratio than Jamaica and other countries in the Caribbean. The OECD blacklisting. We've dealt with the European Union grey listing. And we're still yet to see what are the obligations made by this government to get us to the grey list with the European Union. We are glad for it, but we want to know what it is and what are the implications for the Fiscal Incentives Act with respect to the European Union. But the OECD's blacklist still is there with implications for our international business sector, the sector to which the Minister of Finance admitted continues to contribute the majority of our corporation taxes in this country, even as we speak today. And the uncertainty surrounding this sector may have implications for whether countries stay or decide to move, and definitely who will invest, because people will not invest in a country that is blacklisted out of Europe. The sewage. We hear now that there will be a supplementary, I assume, and therefore the estimates will not have that amount in it. But where else in the estimates do we see the attempt to be able to deal with the Bridgetown sewage system? And as we speak today, businesses were shut down in Fontebelle. Pan American Life, Shop Smart, and other businesses because of the stench coming from the Bridgetown sewage system. Where is the position with West Coast sewage plant? Where is the position with the South Coast? Because what the minister spoke to was the immediate issues, and we pray, we hope that the plans that they will be undertaken will work. But in our view, they should have been undertaken weeks and months and years ago. This government was warned about it 2 years ago. Did nothing. The bus situation. 60 buses, if we are lucky, servicing the whole country. People standing up. In some instances, waiting 3 and 4 hours to get a bus. And this government can continue to owe UCAL over $16 million in arrears. And this government could have paid a man from Trinidad a package worth $20,000 a month, and more buses end up off the road at Mangrove than were fixed when the man came in to fix them. That is a crisis situation affecting ordinary Barbadians, from St. Lucie to St. Peter to St. Philip to St. John to St. Joseph to St. Andrew to St. George to Christchurch to St. Michael. It is crisis in the transport sector. But the same government that made a lot of noise at the last election about not wanting to do certain things turns around and increased the number of licenses held by private people by over 250 licenses awarded, and the number of buses running by the Transport Board drops from near 300 to 60 or so. If that is not privatization through the front door by Minister Lashley, the Honourable Member, sorry, for St. Philip North, I don't know what it is. Water, I spoke about, is still at crisis level in the country. The truth is that contracts have been issued for additional capacity, but those are yet to be delivered. And some may argue that it's overcapacity that has been contracted. Do we have the capacity to absorb 15 million gallons more per day? And if not, why are we paying for it straight out? Indiscipline among our young people. As this honourable chamber met today, our hearts were hurt again. Yet another day, another young boy in this country hurt, this time on a school premises. And yet we continue to turn our heads. This estimate here should have a provision in it to be able to put safety officers on Transport Board buses carrying children to school and picking them up from school. If the buses were coming on time, the children would be spending less time at the bus stops getting into idle trouble. All of these things become connected. But what we have in here is numbers for the sake of numbers, nothing to solve the crisis that faces this country today. And there's nothing in here that the Attorney General can tell us that has been put in here for him to get rid of the 10,000 backlog criminal cases. Business as usual in the court system. But we are in here to discuss these estimates 3 weeks from the dissolution of Parliament, with reserves that are declining at a rate too fast for any of us to be comfortable in this country. Accident and emergency and QEH in general. If people don't have the money to carry along the little extra things that they need, God help them. And this is nothing we take delight from. But the reality is that the numbers in this estimates are $50 million less than the QEH, $45 million less than the QEH needs, according to them, to run. And who is it that is put on the front line of the adjustment? Poor people. Middle class people who no longer have disposable income. Taxed to the max. Savings gone. No salary increase. And nobody's expecting wonders overnight. But we also believe that if you don't help people to live in this country, we are going to run into trouble. All young, poor, low middle income, police, nurses, teachers, public servants, gas station workers, clerical officers, everybody except a few smelling hell in this country. And you will have contracts being issued at the airport again, willing to go up to $185 million at the airport in contracts, taking a bank financing that is more expensive than the Caribbean Development Bank, and we got crises to fix in this country. Sugar industry. Well, they plant this plant. You owe them in 2016, 17, 2017, 18. And they have to make a decision because every field that is not planted, when it comes out of production, takes 5 to 7 years to go back into production. And while the minister may be trying, that's the truth. BAMC, what are they getting? Business as usual. What's happening with the plant? What's happening with the factory? All of the things that they have said, waste of time. And the roads. Well, we hear roads are now to be done. A government in power for 121 months and want us now to rely on a future 100-page plan, a 100-page to-do list. What does this government recommend itself to the people? If that is its interest, because its interest certainly is not stabilizing the public of Barbados. And as to the Minister of Finance, go back and read 2013. We heard then. We've heard all of these glorious things again in 2013. We were to see a PPP basis with the largest road building program, 125 million special roads and bridge package, page 50 of the budget of 2013. We were to see the Exmouth housing complex in October 2013. Thank God we didn't see that, because we will hear more about who paid who and what was paid for what and who didn't get this and who lied on cabinet with this. But today is not the day for that, because I stay focused on what our problem is. A reserve problem that is dire. The cruise pier project in Bridgetown Port, the Pierhead Marina, Burr 6. These are the things that this government continues to announce like if it is just new. And I see a new one in here that the minister didn't talk about. Was it Bay Street Development Plan? Tourism for government. We don't know anything about that yet, but I suppose in the wash it might come out. But you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, I could speak and respond in like form to this minister. I'm not going to, because this is a charade. And this country now deserves better. This country now must pause. This is not about BLP, DLP, or any kind of P anymore. This is not about the government or its nephew or its niece. This is about a country's ability to see June. We have a date with destiny with respect to our foreign debt in June. And the minister speaks glibly as he did in the past, same 2013 speech, about central bank, and it came so sotto voce at the end of his speech that the central bank may be trying to raise a loan to prop up the reserves. But what he didn't tell you is that at the same time he's saying this, he's proposing a reprofiling debt management exercise. Now, who is going to come and willingly lend you money when you are saying that those who have already lent you money have to look at the interest and the tenor of the loans? Let us get real. And for whatever reason, and believe you me, that's the preserve of the Prime Minister. But what is not his preserve is the condition of the people of this country and the condition of our reserves and the stability of this country. And if he is prepared to fiddle while this country declines and rolls down this hill, then I say the public of Barbados will have to judge it on merit. But what I fear is that along the way, there will be casualties, as there have been. There are companies that no longer exist today because of this government's failure to pay. There are people who couldn't take the stress, and their health has been affected by this government's failure to care. This Prime Minister has yet to visit the people of the North to see them with their water problems, as he is to visit the people of the South with the sewage problems. And we have to listen and to hear that the Constitution provides me with X. well, the Constitution may provide him with X, but the people of the country need to breathe. And we cannot breathe with a government that has abandoned its office. It is one thing to have a driver's license. It is another thing to be able to drive. And this government has abandoned it. Worse still, the tools that are necessary to fix this country will not be available to us in this Parliament 3 weeks from today. I ask in the name of the people of Barbados. I ask in the name of this country's stability. If ever there was an opportunity for this government to stop and pause and put the national interest first, it is now. And it is not the opposition that is asking, it is the country. Because if the vital statistics are what we believe them to be, then this House will already be judged as loitering and delinquent as to the condition of the country, which requires urgent and immediate intervention to stabilize it. The reason why they sit on the right side of the Speaker is because in this Parliament they are representatives too of the executive. As representatives of the executive, it is only they and they alone who can execute and who can initiate policy and who can deal with initiation of anything to do with taxation in this Parliament. This government has abandoned its responsibilities to the people of this country, and it is now loitering on the premises of the Parliament and the executive seat in this country. I say that this country will not go forward until a mandate is sought and the people of Barbados decide what is it they are prepared to do to stabilize this country and who should be the people leading that exercise. Until such time, we are spinning top in mud. And this opposition will not legitimize that exercise, which is an insult to the intelligence of the people of Barbados. I'm obliged to you.